If you've tested audiences and that didn't work, or if you've tested lookalikes and that didn't work either, this video is just for you. Let's talk about which lookalike audiences are working right now after the iOS 14 update. Probably you've seen that the performance of lookalike audiences that used to work before the iOS 14 update now is quite low. So let's first of all understand why is that happening. For that, we have to understand how lookalike audiences actually work, how actually Facebook AI built these audiences. So as you know, these lookalike audiences, they are built from a machine, and this machine takes certain points and certain learnings from your custom audience. Now custom audiences, these are people who've engaged with your post, let's say on Instagram or on Facebook, your website visitors, or some people who've watched a certain percentage from your video. So the machine looks at certain points and behaviors from those pools of audiences, and then kind of based on how they interact, based on their age, based on their gender, based on what kind of posts they liked, let's say on Instagram, they are gonna work out to whom to show your ads to when it comes to these lookalike audiences. And back then, a very good lookalike audience that worked quite well for many brands out there was a lookalike 1% of their past purchasers. So let's say purchasers in the last 180 days. And logically that makes sense because your purchasers is the most valuable audience that you could have. So lookalike based on that sounds very valuable, right? Because as we mentioned before, Facebook is going to try to show your ads to a very similar pool of audience. But now I noticed that doesn't work anymore. As people started opting out from tracking, now your custom audience, your let's say circle of your purchasers is much smaller. And lookalikes, they work much better with broader custom audiences. So that means once your audience has shrunken significantly, because I think we've got probably 80 or to 90% of people who opted out. So it's a lot of people. And from there, this lookalike audience is kind of suffocating because it doesn't have enough data. And as we know, the machine and the AI works based on the data, and they like much more data. So if we can give much more data, in that case, that will work out better. So the lookalikes that are working right now are the ones with higher percentages. So I'm talking about, I've seen that they start kind of performing from 5% and above. If your audience size is actually very, very small, in that case, I would recommend even going to up to 10%. And one of the best practices that time to time I use is actually I stack with lookalike audiences. So for example, I could stack lookalike of social media engagers of 5% with lookalike of website visitors of 5% as well. And in that way, what I do, I give tons and tons of data to the machine so they could work out better to whom to show your ads to. But in any kind of scenarios, we still have some kind of exceptions. And in lookalike scenario, we have an exception here. So if your country was not affected by iOS 14, let's say a lot of people, they use in your country Android instead of this Apple ecosystem, in that case, your lookalike of 1% of your purchasers can still work quite well. But generally speaking, if you're targeting big countries like the US, Canada, I would recommend increasing those percentages of your lookalikes. One more thing that you have to be aware of is that a lookalike is a good option if your ad spend is ranging between $100 to $500 a day. But if you want to scale much more aggressively, if you want to go above so you could generate much more revenue, in that case you have to be aware that lookalike audiences will not work so well, because lookalikes, they are very limited in terms of your audience size, even if you go to 10%. So a good alternative for lookalikes is a broad audience. A broad audience is basically audiences that you have no detailed targeting, without interest, without lookalikes. You simply add the age, the gender, and the country. That's it. Because at the end of the day, how the algorithms target right now, yes, they look at some of your targeting options like interest, things like that, age and gender. But what is a better guidance for them is your creative, your copy, and your landing page. I talked a lot about that, in the majority of my YouTube videos. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I would highly recommend checking out this video and understand better of how the ad algorithms work right now when it comes to targeting. And essentially these broad audiences, they generate the best results possible across all my client accounts, considering that we consistently work on the ad creatives, we're consistently trying to be more concise, let's say, in this way, with our verbiage, with our language, because it's very important to be specific with your language, with your words, because those words are still a huge guidance for the algorithms. And in fact, I have an entire video dedicated to broad audiences, so check it out right here. And so far, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give me a subscribe if you are new here, click on the like button, and until then, my advice is to keep launching new ads.